From Dogman to Sasquatch to Paranormal, the unknown is out there, and whatever lurks in the darkness of the night is watching. You're listening to The Venomous Fringe.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and you're listening to The Venomous Fringe. Tonight's guest is cryptozoologist Lee McNew. Lee, welcome to The Venomous Fringe. How are you tonight, my friend?
Doing good. Good to be here.
Absolutely, I'm glad to have you here, sir. Lee, let me ask you the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I've got a law enforcement background, and where do you want me to start?
Well, where did it all begin with you with cryptids? Like, where did it all start? You mentioned law enforcement. Did it start when you were on the force, or did it start sometime afterwards?
Oh no, it started then. It started about 2006 is when I had my first encounter, and it was I guess what you would call a Class B. It was audio. I have yet to see one, but I've heard one a couple of times. I've heard what I believe to be Sasquatch. I was camping alone on top of a mountain close to my folks' place. It was my last day there, and I was relaxing. It was probably, I think it was about around 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm reading a book by the light of a Coleman lantern. I'm just enjoying the atmosphere. And I hear this sound come from the other side of the mountain from where I'm at, and it made the hair stand on end. It was like it started out it went from a roar to a howl to a scream, and I've never heard anything like it before. My first reaction was like, "What in the world was that?" I had no idea. I've never heard anything like that before, and it made me stand up out of my chair. And whatever it was, I could tell it was big because of the sound it was making. And then it did it again, and I could tell it wasn't that far away. Um, I did some recollecting on that, and I could say it was probably maybe 100 yards away, if that. And it did that 3 times, and on the third time, it's almost like I felt it on the third time. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it scared the hell out of me. Um, I got in my Jeep and I went down the mountain, and I did not come back till daylight the following day for my gear. My tent and everything, I left it all there. The only weapons I had at the time on me was a camping axe and a little 32 pistol for snakes. That's all I had. And I felt way outmatched. So I left then. After that, I got on the internet and started looking around and uh, see if I could find what could make that noise. You know, what made that sound. Um, the biggest part of my childhood was spent in those woods. You know, because we didn't have video games and stuff like that back then, not readily available like you got today, and you pretty much had to use your imagination or whatever. But I spent most of my time out in the woods. I was fortunate enough to have close to 100 acres to roam around on. So I did it. And I was never afraid of anything, ever, while I was out there. I never worried about anything. Um, it bothered me. It bothered me a lot that something out there could do that to me. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a coyote, fox, uh, an owl. Owls make some freaky noises too, but it wasn't any one of those. And I looked and I looked and I looked, and the closest thing I could come to the roar was an African lion. And there are no African lions around here. It's the Southwest Virginia I'm talking about. Um, so there wasn't a whole lot I could find on it. I mean, Bigfoot wasn't even in my realm of thinking at that point. Um, Fast forward maybe 7 years later, um, I'm at my new house. I've remarried, um, a newborn son. My wife is at work. I'm at home. It's late. It's probably about around the same time, probably about around 10:30, 11 o'clock. I take the dog out to let him do his business, and uh, not far, probably about the same distance, probably about 150, 200 yards away, by a creek down in the field. I hear the same sound. Um, and the first thing I thought of, because of the howl, I mean, the first thing that come to my mind was werewolf. What is this? Is there a damn werewolf around here? What is this? I holler at my dog, get him in the house. I lock everything down, and I really start looking then. And it wasn't. I didn't really find it. I couldn't really find anything. Um, and we'd moved from that place, um, maybe a couple of months after that. And our new place, I'm messing around one day, pilling around on YouTube, and I just look up, you know, for kicks, Sasquatch, because I had a niece. She's a firm believer in it at the time, and like I said, um, Sasquatch wasn't anywhere near um, my realm of thinking, because I was like, over 2/3 of the population that think that if there is such a thing as Sasquatch and Bigfoot, that he's in the Pacific Northwest. There ain't no way they're near here. And I stumbled on Sasquatch Chronicles, and they had Ron Moorhead on there, and they had him going through his Sierra Sounds tapes, and there was a couple of sounds on there that really um, shook my tree, and I was like, "What in the world was that?" And it was so close to what I heard. And then he played a piece from um, the Ohio Howl, and put them both together. If you could put them both together, it was really close to what I heard. This and keep listening. I keep listening to some of the eyewitness accounts, because at that point I'm really hooked. I'm intrigued. I was like, this is what I heard, and it all coming back. Um, the the fact that Sasquatch was what I heard blew my mind. Um, it wasn't long till it was on Thanksgiving. Uh, we had we moved again, and on Thanksgiving we're over there at my mom's house, and we decided we're going to go for a little walk. After Thanksgiving dinner, it was me, my sister, my brother, a couple others, and we were walking along. We were walking out through the woods, and at this point, I've got Sasquatch on the brain. And lo and behold, because it's not too far away from where I had my first encounter. I found a knuckle track, and after that, I was hooked. It was like these things are real. I tried. All I had was my phone, and some say it just doesn't transfer well. I've tried. I've really tried to make it transfer well from my phone to It, I didn't have anything to cast with. I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just looking, you know. And at that point, that was the first real piece of physical evidence. Everything else was, I don't know, guesswork, I guess, and theory, and just looking for what everybody else had either said or told me. It was crazy. It turned my world upside down. Just that one track, and I found the Bigfoot Outlaws had some pictures up on their website, the Bigfoot Outlaw Hideout, and it was a knuckle track in Texas, and it was almost identical in shape and size. It was crazy. So that was the validation. That was the validation I needed for me to move forward, to start my own type of investigation. And that's pretty much how I got into cryptids. Before that, I'd been involved in paranormal research, and it's a totally different ball game. Man, it's totally different.
Well, first and foremost, for witnessing howls and experiencing that must have been something very traumatic for you, because as someone who had been in law enforcement, you've come across many tough cases once in a blue moon with criminals and all that, but to witness that, your reaction to that, did that change your whole perspective on how you saw the forest, the woods, and more importantly, life in general?
I gotta say, yeah. I mean, it it made me more aware. It's almost like a veil had been lifted. I've been walking around with blinders on all this time, and ignorant, really. Um, and it's really hard to convey this to people who still have those blinders on and still are ignorant. And, and and I mean that in the literal sense of the word. I mean, they just do not know. And the reason why I'm doing the investigation that I'm doing, and and I'm blogging, excuse me. The the reason why I'm doing it is to get as much information out there as I can, and see who can pick up on it. Yeah, I want to inform people. People should know. After finding out about David Paulides' 411 and hearing some of his stories from that, it really, um, made my hair stand on end. And knowing just how close I could have been if they were in the area, you know. Um, yeah, it really did change my perspective. I'm not afraid to go out in the woods because it's just so much a part of me. It's like I said, I grew up in that environment. It's just part of who I am, and I feel comfortable out there to a degree now. There's the comfort level isn't as much as it used to be. Uh, the uh, the fact that I have to go out armed every time now is a big difference.
Let me ask you this, because you had mentioned that when you had heard those howls, and then you were under the impression it might have been a Sasquatch. Are you sure you may have think it would have been a Sasquatch, or do you feel that would have been more of a Dogman? Now, before you answer that question, how did those howls sound? Did they sound very like this, like a bloody murder screech, or did it sound like a very vicious uh, howl, like something that you'd hear out of a movie, like American Werewolf in London or The Howling?
It sounded angry. It sounded like I don't know how you would. The emotion, and I got an emotion out of it. It's almost like you'd walked into your house and you found somebody in there that wasn't supposed to be in there, and you're hollering. You're yelling, "Get out of my house!" And that's almost how I felt. And to be honest with you, remember I told you when I heard it the second time, and this was a couple of years later that I heard the same thing, and this was several miles away, probably about 15, 20 miles away. Um, the first thing I thought of was werewolf, with the howl, the roar, the howl, the scream, and the way it transitioned in pitch was insane. And every every recording of vocalizations I've heard of Sasquatch, I've yet to hear one that mimics it. They've come close, but they haven't been the exact same. I did hear. Once again, I got to go back to Sasquatch Chronicles because I was a religious viewer. I listened to the shows all the time. There was an episode called "The Devil's Lettuce." I can't remember the exact number of the episode, but the episode name was "The Devil's Lettuce," and this guy was growing pot in California, and he had run into one of these creatures, and he described exactly what I heard. He's the only one that I have yet to hear describe exactly what I've heard. So, and it's just been here lately, to get back to your question, that I've been shifting my focus a little bit more toward the Dogman instead of the Bigfoot. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm still very, very intrigued by the Bigfoot Sasquatch phenomena. But the more I've been diving into this, the more I think it's very well possible that it could have been a Dogman and not a Sasquatch.
And the reason why I ask that is because a lot of eyewitnesses, when they hear howls or mysterious ruckus in the bushes like that, they are under the impression that that might be a dogman. Now, Sasquatch, there's been some reports there and there of reported howling, but at the same time, it's not necessarily. It's hard to pinpoint because it would be more classified under that of a dogman or a werewolf. Now, you're aiming towards more of the dogman realm. Let me ask you this. What do you think a dogman is?
Oh, geez. I used to think I knew, but there's so much, there's so many facets to it now. And there's different types to a dogman, like there's different types to a Sasquatch, really. Um, and I'm just learning that. You've got a big leg up on me on that. I've listened to your show, and I think it's flesh and blood, but I think maybe there may be some type of paranormal facet to it. Um, Maybe. I'm not really sure. Like I said, I'm still learning, but right now that's where I'm at.
Well, the reason why I asked that question is because a lot of people out there aren't necessarily too sure themselves, including myself, what a dogman is. While I agree with what you just said, because that's under my belief as well, what do you feel with these creatures is paranormal about them? Like, what do you see them in a paranormal realm, like when it comes to how they are, or when it comes to how immune they are to a lot of reports, such as one that you can shoot at one, it can bleed, but somehow still lives?
Yeah, their overall physical toughness, that and their menacing aura, I guess you'd say. There's something about that lends a little um, piece of evidence to me for me to believe that they have some type of supernatural aspect to them. Um, do I think they're a man transformed into a beast? No, I don't think so. I think it's possible. I think it could be possible in certain given situations with demonic possession and whatnot. But as far as the Dogman goes, per se, the actual Dogman, I believe it's an entity of itself. I believe it to be flesh and blood, but supernatural in origin. That's basically where I'm trying to get to. And I've changed my tune about the Sasquatch as well over the few years. When I first started my investigations, I was hardcore into the flesh and blood, the North American Great Ape Camp, and started, if I, and it shames me to say this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. And there's a few people who's come around to my way of thinking too, so I don't feel so bad. But when people started talking about portals, disappearances in thin air, Bigfoot being able to vanish, I used to laugh at that. I mean, almost out loud. If someone were to bring that up to me, I would have laughed. As rude as that sounds, but diving deeper into the subject made me think a little deeper about the subject. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those things where we know nothing about these creatures. Bigfoot, um, Dogman. We don't know anything about these creatures, and people out here who say they're experts, if they claim such, I think I right out call them a liar. There's nothing to be. There's so much to be learned about these creatures right now. There's so much that we do not know. There's the fact that we know nothing about these creatures. Uh, they, I'm not. Well, let me rephrase that. We do know some things about it through eyewitness testimony, personal encounters. That's one thing we do know. We know what people have seen and experienced, and you judge it on that. And it would not be doing anybody any favors. And as a researcher or an investigator, you wouldn't be doing anybody any favors, and you wouldn't be doing your due diligence as a researcher or an investigator if you threw out all these claims of supernatural ability on any of their parts. I feel that you need to take that and compartmentalize it. Put some things in a box. If it's not adding up right now, you put it over here in this pile. You put other things that you're pretty sure of in another pile, and then you come back to visit the other stuff at a later date. Don't throw it out, and don't discount any of it.
I agree wholeheartedly because I feel that there are people out there, and this is just my opinion as well, that try to pinpoint things as facts, and not everything is based on what this person says versus what this other theory states. And then on top of that, when it comes to people who believe in the expertism, let me ask you this. What is your definition of someone who is an expert in cryptozoology when it comes to Sasquatch and Dogman? What would convince you that this person's an expert?
Let's see. What would convince me that they're an expert? If they could take me to these creatures, if they could introduce me to these creatures, it is if they could bring one out to the public, that would convince me. Um, because, like I said, in my point of view, there's a lot of people who would not who don't follow this. There's some out here who just research the research. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not trying to do anything else other than for themselves. And I appreciate that. I really do. I could say go ahead, but me personally, I think it's something that people need to know about. I think it's something that needs to be brought to light. I think it's something that everyone should be aware of, that their existence is real and not some joke. I believe that if you're an expert in the field, you'll be able to do this. You'll be able to provide the evidence and crack your finger. And nobody could refute it.
I agree with that as well because I've myself, when I've spoken to individuals in the field, I've always believed that the only way to convince me that you're legitimate as an expert is either you can take me to people or take me to these creatures and have a communication bond with them and know their culture, know their everything about them. On top of that, as well, I'm not. But when it comes to a body, I'm mixed with it because while I do think it's right to showcase that these things do exist, it would also just a big backfire, a huge stir of researchers out there who would be like, oh, the whole aspect of killing one. Which leads me to my next question. Are you pro-kill or anti-kill when it comes to these creatures?
Well, when I'm out there, I mentioned before that when I'm out in the woods now, I'm armed, and that's just for protection. Um, am I out there to kill one? No. Do I believe one has to be killed to prove its existence? Yeah, I think that's what it's going to take. But as far as putting an open season on them, no, I don't believe that should be done. I think that's a dangerous game, and I think it's wrong, to be honest. Um, Years ago, um, I used to be a hunter, right? I hunted for one sole purpose. That's put meat on the table, put food in the freezer. And once I was able to get away from that, you know, the only real joy I got out of it was being out in the woods. Um, there was a certain thrill to it up to a point when I actually had to pull the trigger. I had to do it. Like I said, it put food on the table. But now, no, I haven't hunted in years, and it, things would have to get bad for me to really start back again. Um, I don't think it to be pro kill. Like I said, I guess it all depends on how you want to phrase that pro kill. Is it just a um, prove their existence, or um, put an open season on them once you find out they're out there?
Well, what I mean is there are people out there, like you just said, the latter of people who would want to go out and kill one, like a hunter or a poacher, just to say, hey, we killed a dog man, you know?
Yeah, yeah. That's the only thing about proving their existence that I feel would be a drawback. There are there are trophy hunters out there who would dive headfirst into a chance to put one on the wall, or have one mounted in their den or somewhere in their house. Say, hey, look here. No, I'm totally against that. And there's some people out there who might scoff at that, but I don't care. I don't think it's right. But as far as proving their existence, um, there's so much out there. Melba Ketchum, she did so much in a way of DNA study. There's proof. It's just the scientific community does not want to acknowledge it because they say they don't have anything to compare it against. Well, if they've got a body, they've got something to compare it against, you know, and that's the only reason why I say that one needs to be brought in. That's the only reason. So I guess if that's how you want to put it, then I guess I am pro kill.
It's not a problem. I mean, everyone's entitled to an opinion, too. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone and even people who are listening should respect opinions, of course, and that's what we do on the show and what I do in my groups as well. Lee, another thing is that one of the things that fascinates me about the history or a supposed history of these creatures is that there is a link to Native Americans. Do you believe that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've got stories going back as far as they've been around. Um, there's so many stories about dogman type creatures, Bigfoot type creatures, giants. That's another thing that intrigues me is giants. They have they've got so many stories, and they I don't know if you're aware of this, but they actually have excuse me, they have a story about a great flood. They have a story about a great flood. So, and it's all around the world. Um, and the Native Americans, I believe they have had some type of relationship with the Sasquatch for a long time. Whether it be good or whether it be bad, it all depends on what tribe you're talking to. There are some tribes that are like, yeah, they're good. They're the forest mothers. They're ones they're keeping everything in peace. And there are other tribes that will say, no, kill them. Um, yeah, I believe that they have a connection with them.
When it comes to Sasquatch, do you feel that there is going to be some sort of, besides what we mentioned prior, some sort of scientific breakthrough within down the road when it comes to what these creatures are? Because there's a lot of research. You mentioned Melba Ketchum, for example. Like, the whole fact of what she's going through with the whole science community. Do you feel that maybe not in our generation, but maybe in the future generation, there'll be some sort of breakthrough and some sort of discovery that can say, okay, these creatures do exist, that they are out there, that they are acknowledged, but right now, currently in our present day, there is some sort of rift holding it back?
Oh yeah, I do believe that. I believe there's a big rift holding it back. I believe our federal government's doing that. Um, and I think there are so many reports, eyewitness accounts coming forward now that if it continues at this rate, I think that the government may have no choice but to disclose this information to us. I think that they'll come clean, but it's going to have to take something drastic, um, something major to happen. And like I said, everything's coming to a head. Um, you look at the the state the world's in right now, and still yet you're having sightings of this so-called mythical creature out here. These mythical creatures, and there's a multitude of them, and there's so many that it boggles my mind. But the ones I'm trying to, it's hard to wrap your head around all of them, you know. And Bigfoot, Dogman, and so forth. They're the main ones I'm looking at right now as being the ones that will bring this thing to a head. I think if it does happen, and I agree that this will be something that's going to come to a head here in the future. Um, where our government's going to have to come clean about their knowledge of these creatures.
I agree with that 100%. In the realm of Dogman, how many types do you believe are out there? In other words, are you familiar with the 7 variants?
Actually, yeah, yeah, I'm aware of them, mainly because of your show. Actually, I did not know there were that many that was um, defined, but there could be as many out there as there are different type of people. Um, they may fall in a certain category, but I think there's probably a bunch of different ones out there. Um, you know, short ones, tall ones, uh, heavy set ones, muscular ones, skinny ones. I've heard all types. Um, yeah, I believe there are different types out there. Yeah.
When you're out into the woods, what is it that you look out for when you're doing your vlogging, and when you're out there? What is it that you're checking in the surroundings you're in?
Um, well, it's kind of layered, actually, what I'm looking for. Um, on the surface, I'm looking for sign that they leave behind, tree breaks, bends, rock stacks, things of that nature, footprints, and hair, which I've yet to find. I've yet to find any hair. Um, and these are things that I can do casually. But the one thing I'm constantly looking for is movement, um, different types of movement that are out of the norm. Um, so my head's on a swivel the whole time I'm out there. Uh, I do my research in the national forest, and there's a lot of hiking trails, biking trails, and I'll go off trail every so often. When I go off trail, that's when my alertness factor goes way up. I believe that if you stay on the trail where I'm investigating, it's pretty clear cut that there's not a lot of people going to be bothered there. There's people who travel through my area all the time, hiking, biking, camping. You know, it's almost like it's a live and let live type situation. But when I'm out there and I'm doing my research, like I said, the casual part is just looking for the sign, uh, tree bends, breaks, leans. I've yet to see one of the tree piece structures, but that's probably out there. I still hadn't stumbled upon that yet. But my main thing I'm looking for is movement in the brush. That's what I'm looking for.
A couple more questions before we wrap up the cryptid aspect of what we're discussing here, because I want to discuss some paranormal with you as well. Um, in your own opinion, would you say that cryptids are these creatures that are descendants to us, or are we linked to them, or do you believe that there's regular animals, hybrid genetics of other animals of the zoological charts?
Um, hmm, that's kind of a tricky question for me. Um, I used to think that first. I used to think that they were our second cousin, I guess. But now I'm beginning to think otherwise. I think that they're different from us. We might share some of their DNA, but I don't think we're that related. That's just me personally. Um, as far as Sasquatch goes, the Dogman, I'm not really certain where it comes from. That in and of itself is a bigger mystery to me than than a Sasquatch, because I mean it's just that from an anthropological point of view, looking at it that way, you know, we are all primates, and they are a primate. We as humans, we're also primates. That leads to a a conclusion drawing statement that we could be related. But personally, I don't think so. I think we're different. Like I said, my way of thinking has changed a lot over the years. Um, and once again, with the Dogman, I'm not sure. I don't know where it comes from. It there are reports of Dogman type creatures and um, Sumerian text. That's some of the oldest written text. So it's hard to tell.
Do you have any advice for anybody out there? Because one of the things that really intrigues me is that you go out there and you're vlogging and you're in the bush, as I call it, and you go out and you're vlogging and you're discussing things about the cryptids and of course what's out in the surroundings. But for those out there who are also interested in that, as well as those who could take a follow at what do you have any advice for those who are interested in that or interested in cryptids like Sasquatch and Dogman or in general?
Yeah, be careful. Don't um, put yourself out there too much, too fast. Um, my thing is, I know they're in my area, and I'm trying to respect their their space as much as they are obviously respecting ours. But I also want to kind of push it a little bit at a time, gradually. And I'm not I'm not a gifter. I'm wholeheartedly against that gifting. I'm against that. Um, but I do believe in um, habituation. I guess the word's called. If you can do that by being in an area and putting your scent in an area, um, they will come to recognize that. Like, oh, this fellow's here again. Let's take a look and see what they're doing. You'll probably get some activity after that. Take your time. It's not going to happen overnight. I've been researching this area for a little over a year now, and I'm just now starting to get some serious activity um, with stone structures now and um, sounds that I've been hearing. They're mimicking different sounds. It's kind of neat. Um, and be careful. Be careful. Do not be out there thinking that these are forest giants. Um, be aware of your surroundings always, and just be careful while you're out there. I'm out there by myself mainly because um, I really don't have anybody to accompany me on my investigations. But if you can do it, get somebody to go with you. Have a buddy with you. Somebody who can watch your back. You know, that's my advice. And don't take anything for granted. We have a as researchers and investigators, we're following one of two traps. One, we while we're investigating, we'll scrutinize it to death to the point where we'll rule it out, even though it's plausible evidence. We can just say, "Oh no, somebody could have done that." Yeah, sure, somebody could have done that, but why would they have done that? You've got to think of that. And so, you know, we like I said, we could scrutinize it to the point where we could throw out plausible evidence just because we're trying to find that perfect piece. or you're so intent on finding something that everything has Sasquatch in it. Everything has a Dogman in it. Everything. You know, what do they call it? Blob squatches now? Well, you take a picture of some bushes and, oh, look, see, here it is. No, you could fall one of those two traps, but be diligent, and take your time. Uh, Scrutinize some of it, but not to the point to where you're going to have to throw everything out. That's where I'm at right now.
That's a very good analogy, and of course I respect what you do in the field and whatnot for your research, and of course I'll make sure people take a look at what you're doing. I'll leave a link for your YouTube in the description and whatever else you would like to get in contact with. But I want to transition now to the paranormal, because earlier you had mentioned prior to cryptids you were into paranormal. Where did it all start with you with paranormal? Was it activity that you've encountered, or was it just fascination?
It started, for me personally, it started when I had moved into a house, and me and my ex-wife and my stepson, we'd all started experiencing poltergeist type activity. Um, it started not too long after we had moved in there. I'd always been fascinated by it. That's what made me actually get out there and start learning about the field. Because pretty much I had to. My family was being tormented by them, by whatever this was in the house. My first experience was when I was probably about 6 or 7 years old. I saw an apparition of a little girl in a hallway outside my bedroom, and when me and my sister were real little, we had to share a bedroom for a while, and I woke up one night and I heard some movement in the hallway. I said, "What's going on?" So I looked. It was really small room. Uh, I look out into I crawl to the foot of my bed. I look out the door of my bedroom into the hallway, and I see this girl standing there. It looked like, I thought it was my sister. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing? What's wrong?" Because she looked really sad. She was leaned up against the wall on her right side, and she kind of had her hands folded together in front of her, and she ducked her head like she was getting ready to cry. I said, "Come on, sis, what's wrong?" And she kind of like disappeared. Okay. And it's like, what? And I heard my sister in the bottom bunk below me. It freaked me out. When I was a kid, that was at 6, 7 years old. Man, it's like, who was that? I told my mom and dad about that, and they just kind of laughed. They said, "You were dreaming." I said, "No, I was wide awake. I was wide awake. I can remember that today. 30 some years later, yeah, I can remember that today. So that was no dream." And, getting back to what got me started into it, my house, like I said, was haunted um, by something. Um, I don't know whether it was something brought in there by what was going on between my ex-wife and my stepson. Because at that point in time, my stepson was starting to just have problems with drug addiction, and we weren't in the best spot of our marriage. It wasn't long after that we got a divorce. Um, there was something in the house. It started with things falling off shelves. whole shelves falling off walls. I used to be able to. I would explain it away. Say, oh well, we need to put anchors in the wall. Blah blah blah. Well, some of these shelves already had anchors in the wall, and didn't have a whole lot of weight on them, but stuff would be flying out in the floor off the shelf. Um, I had one incident, Halloween. Um, my mother called me, and she said that after tricks or treats were over, she said she had some extra candies. Be good for some of the kids. And asked if I wanted to come get some. So I did. I went up there. And I wasn't up there long till I got a phone call. And it's my wife. And she says, Lee, you've got to come down here. Somebody's pranking the house. Somebody's running around from door to door, front door to back door, banging on the door. And we don't know what's going on. So at the time, I made my way back down there. I had my service weapon with me. And I got out the car and did a full perimeter search. There was a heavy dew on the ground at that point. And I saw no tracks whatsoever. I got in and they proceeded to tell me that not too long after I left, there was a banging on the front door. They went to answer it, nobody was there. And as soon as they closed the door, there was a banging on the back door, which was a glass patio door. And nobody was there. And it continued like this for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. There was nobody there. We had sounds of footsteps running across the floor, and there was nobody attached to the footsteps. I was there for that, sitting in the living room. I was asleep on the couch. I woke up and there was a girl standing in sort of Victorian dress. She might have been in her teens, and she was standing there. She looked at me and then disappeared. A full body apparition. It wasn't one of those in between states of sleep, because when I saw her, I immediately jumped up off the couch, because this is somebody I did not know. I'm in a vulnerable state. I'm in my house at night on the couch. Wake up and there's a strange person standing at the edge of the couch. My couch is right by the front door, and I stood up, and she just disappeared. Disappeared. It was crazy. The first time that I had anything happen to me before that, I'd gotten home in the morning. I'd work night shift, and a lot of this stuff happened during the day. You know, that doesn't all happen at night. During the day, in the morning, the sun's come up. It's probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. Like I said, I just come off a night shift. I'm washing, cleaning up, getting ready for bed. And when I turned the water on in the next room, it sounded like there was a party going on. I mean, multiple voices. And if you've ever been in a crowded room and hear that buzz of all these voices going on, where you can't pick out any one particular voice, that's what it sounded like. But as soon as I turned the water off, it was done. And I attribute that later on, me being able to hear that, because of the white noise the water was making. It was some type of what we would call today an EVP, but it wasn't, if you know what I'm saying. It was weird. I'd originally contributed that to, now this was a long time ago, and our TV at the time had a timer on it, and I thought that maybe somebody had set the timer to wake to turn on the TV, and it was a television set being on in the next room. But like I said, as soon as I turned the water off, the noise had stopped. And I checked the TV, it was okay, and just to be on the safe side, I unplugged the thing. And I went back and turned the water back on, and I heard it again. It kind of creeped me out. I'm not going to lie. I finished doing what I had to do, got ready for bed. After I turned the water off, it was fine. Later on, we had strange things happen, like a whole pot of coffee wound up gone. And that was kind of funny. Her folks had come down to visit, and she was sitting outside with them. She had started brewing another pot of coffee. And I remember her coming in the house, and she says, "Lee, what happened to the coffee?" I said, "What are you talking about?" "I've just brewed a whole pot of coffee. There's nothing here." So, yeah, it took care of a whole pot of coffee. It wasn't long after that, I experienced the knocking myself of the front door and the back door. And I'd had enough. So I had these wind chimes, and I figured I'd read to where certain noise, bells or certain tunes would be able to capture the spirit's attention, kind of wake them up a little bit. I didn't do a sage smudging or anything like that. I just took dominion over my house. I walked from room to room and just stated that this was my house. And they were welcome to stay if they just left me alone. And that's probably where I made my mistake. I said, leave me alone instead of my family. I invoked the name of Christ quite a few times, and it left me alone. After that, I personally had no problems. But my ex-wife and my former stepson, they continued to have problems, and it escalated. They argued and fought all the time. It come to a head on February 21st, 2004. I'm at the police department. I'm in the break room with my partner and my sergeant, and the break room was located right next to our dispatch office, and our dispatchers knew where I was at. One of the dispatchers come out into the break room and said, "Lee, you've got a phone call." And it was, I come in there and I answered the phone, and it was my sister telling me that I needed to get home because my house was on fire. So I left dispatch. I looked at my sergeant, said, "I've got to go. My house is on fire." That's all I said. I got in my vehicle and I left. I got there and my house was fully engulfed. Luckily, my stepson and my ex-wife were okay. Nobody was hurt physically, just emotionally, and because we lost just about everything in that fire. I was with the fire marshal doing an inspection, and he concluded at the time that we had a wood stove in the house. Okay. And he concluded that there was a crack in the flue block and the chimney liner that caused fire to seep through into the wall and ignite a stud. But that house was always cold. It was the same square footage as of a house we had left previously. Um, the same size wood stove that we had in the one before. And I've had to deal with wood stove since I was 12, so I knew how to deal with that. Could never get that house completely warm. Um, the fire marshal that was doing the inspection told me this, but he said that he wasn't 100% sure. He said that's what it looks like it is, but I'm not 100% sure. So after that, um, insurance and everything else took care of that. We had the house rebuilt. A lot of stuff was replaced. And in that time, my stepson got emancipated. He left. Me and my wife started going through a divorce. I moved into that house, back into that house by myself, and didn't have a lick of trouble after that. It was after that, it was during that time when I realized there's a lot more going on in this world than a lot of people realize. Um, and that whatever was going on, I believed it had intelligence, and it was angry because, like I said, after I'd taken dominion over the house, and it shifted its focus from me solely onto them, it got worse. After that, I'd done a few investigations, you know, typical run-of-the-mill ghost hunter stuff, cemetery investigations. I had a couple of houses that were allegedly haunted. I never really did have any other evidence to conclude any of those places had any type of spiritual activity, other than what the owners had said. But I mean, just because we didn't find anything didn't mean that there wasn't anything there, you know. But I'm a firm believer in the supernatural. I've lived it.
It's a very traumatic experience, and I'm very grateful that none of your family were harmed in that situation. And of course, because of the ongoing activity and eventually the phenomenon eventually led to your divorce and of course falling apart of your family. But when it comes to paranormal, I feel that there's just such a huge vibe and presence of just mysterious, and not even just an anomaly, but just something very dense within the field. And I feel that with paranormal, it definitely it takes a toll on you mentally. Do you feel with all of the paranormal activity that you have witnessed and encountered, and of course the scenarios that played out, do you feel that it's impacted you mentally more than what it would normally do to someone who would say, "Oh, I've seen a spirit," and that's just it? You know what I'm saying? Like, do you feel that all of your encounters, do you feel it's all happened in a junction of where it changed you totally, much like cryptids?
Well, I guess to a point, I guess you could say, yeah. It really did shape me into a different person. Um, it just it was bad enough, you know. It's bad enough to have that type of trauma in your house when you're not physically being assaulted by some type of supernatural phenomena. You're having problems out of your kid, your wife. You're having problems. You know, it's bad enough, but to be compounded by spiritual forces, yeah, yeah. I think it really did have it played a number on my ex-wife too. Um, she had, after we had separated, she had went through some she went through some stuff. I think whatever was in that house was kind of still after her. Because there was a couple of times she had told me, because we'd kept in touch for a little bit um, prior to our signing the papers. That she went through some stuff like sleep paralysis. She felt it, um, and I thought that was, for the longest time I didn't understand it. I mean, now I do, um, given the fact I've had a lot of time to research it, look into it. Um, I personally haven't experienced sleep paralysis, and I hope I never do. That's some scary stuff, just thinking about it. But um, yeah, my former stepson, it's played a number on him too, because he he dove heavily into um, into drugs after that. Been in and out of institutions ever since. In and out of jail. Um, he has no relationship with his mother anymore that I know of. Um, and I don't know. I haven't talked to her in probably almost 10 years now. But it does it does a number on you, man. It really does. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, it has played a significant role in shaping who I am today. It's changed me mentally.
And while it's changed you, I'm sure it's made you a much stronger individual versus one that's lived in fear. But with that being said, Lee, when it comes to everything paranormal, have you considered going out and researching hotspots such as like abandoned areas or uh, hospitals or whatnot, like places that are related to paranormal activity?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have a place around here. It's called St. Albans. You might have heard of it. The old St. Albans mental facility. Yeah, it's no longer in service now. It's shut down. But Sci-Fi had taps down here. The ghost hunters actually looking into it. A couple other paranormal investigation teams have done it. There's a couple of other places around here uh, that I think would be good candidates for investigation. Um, at Graham's Mansion. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. It's an old plantation house. It's one of the most haunted areas here in Virginia, reportedly. Um, yeah, I've thought about it. Um, the thing of it is, um, I try not to tempt fate too much anymore, because every now and then you run the possibility of one of these spirits taking a liking to you and following you home. And yeah, I don't need that. I've pretty much given up the. I say given up. Yeah, I can say giving up. Going out and doing stuff like that. I still research it. I mean, I still look into it and keep my knowledge up, just in case something happens and you know somebody needs somebody who knows a little something real quick. I mean, I'm no expert. I do know a little something. I've been through the fire, so to speak. Uh, um, yeah, I've thought about going through the hot spots, and I said, no, I'm not going to.
Well, with that being said, Lee, do you have any closing arguments or anything you would like to say, whether it's in cryptids or paranormal, and so on?
Uh, Hmm. Cryptids right now are my big thing. With the with Sasquatch and all like that. I'm ready. I'm ready for something to happen, for something to come to light. Um, I think that our government knows more than what it's telling. I think there's a lot of cover up. Um, I watched uh, your show on Dogman in Virginia, and it reminded me of a story that I'd found while I was doing my paranormal research. Um, Not too far from here, there's a place called Sweet Spring Hollow. Boy Scouts used to go up in there, and they used to have their jamborees and things like that. That would do their, they get their merit badges and all this stuff. Um, there was a story about the werewolf of Sweet Spring Hollow. Now, I went back the last couple of days, and I have searched and I've searched and I've searched and I've searched for the story, and it's nowhere to be found. Where this story had taken place, it's become a wildlife preserve, mainly because of the indigenous plants that are there. There are two or three different types of plants that are indigenous to that area and grow nowhere else in the world but that area.
And of course, that was Lee's information. And I must say, Lee McNew, very new to the field when it comes to YouTube and in general, when it comes to what we're looking at here. But he's done a lot, I think, for what he's trying to do. And vlogging out there in the bush is one thing. And it's not been done before. There's been some times where it's been executed. But I think with keeping it up to date, I know Scott Carpenter's done his fair share with Dogman, but I think this is really big stuff because, I mean, this is incredible what he's been doing. And I can't go no further than that. And folks, I appreciate you listening to the show, as always. And if you want to get in contact with me, here's an email. And then as always, guys, if you want to support the channel, there's a donation for PayPal. You can leave a donation with the link in the description if you wish. And of course, as always, guys, we will see you next time. Thank you for watching The Venomous Fringe, and you all have a fantastic day and evening, wherever you're at.